Hey guys, welcome back to So Say It Again. This is your host Miliana, and today we're going to be talking about sexual attraction to gender roles. If you look up the definition of gender roles, it's basically just how we're expected to dress, act, speak, according to our sex. And for example, women are supposed to be nurturing, humble, sweet, and men are supposed to be loud, aggressive, good leaders, and all of that jazz. Recently, and if you're on social media, this is probably the case for you too. We've been bombarded with a lot of gender related content. And I mean, there are so many movements going. There are the feminine coaches, the soft life girlies, stepping into their feminine divine energy, all of that. And on the male side, there was the Andrew Tates, the Kevin Samuels, the alpha male embarrassing segue, a new one, masculine energy. So all of that. And it just reminded me of what this lady once said. During the whole Proud Boys January 12th movement, that whole fiasco, there was a lot of just racist content everywhere. And it seemed like every single week there was new hate crime. We just could not get away from the racists. They were everywhere. And this woman explained that when a particular group feels like they're losing their power and they're becoming obsolete, they start making themselves larger than life and try to create this narrative that they're inescapable and that they're everywhere. And they do this to try to make themselves seem like the norm and therefore keep their power in society. Now, I can't help but draw a parallel to what's going on with this gender role movements that we're seeing. Are the gender norms becoming obsolete? I mean, are the people who benefit from traditional gender roles starting to lose their power? So because of that, they're making themselves larger than life and putting themselves everywhere to try to keep that norm in place and therefore keep their status. And what does gender roles have to do with sexual attraction? But first, why is gender roles even relevant? Women do X and men does Y. Why is that even something that exists in our society? And it's really because our brain loves boxes. It loves neat little boxes. And that's why when we judge people and put them in certain categories, we feel more at ease. Now, we all know that those categories sometimes do more harm than they do good, especially when there's retaliation if people do not want to stay in those boxes. And that's really the problem that we're seeing. Society itself has escaped those neat little categories that are created by gender roles, and society has progressed past them. Women are now excelling in the workplace, and the robots are taking all of the labor that was deemed as masculine. And so that creates a conflict. Society has moved and progressed past those roles, but ideologies themselves have not. You speak to a lot of people about the roles of women and men, and you would swear you're talking to someone from 1942 because the rhetoric sounds the same. Women should do this and women should be carers and nurturers, even though women are now in the workplace competing. And a lot of the times they are making as much and sometimes even more money than men. But people refuse to accept that because they have created their entire identity around gender roles. I dated this guy that told me that the reasons why the ancient Greek civilization failed was because they legalized homosexuality. And I was no historian, but that did not sound correct to me. If an entire civilization can be undone by homosexuality, which was present since the beginning of time, then that was not a very strong civilization to begin with. But in his mind, that was what caused their demise because they did not have strong gender roles in place. Society crumbled into chaos, and that is how they fell off. And I can laugh about this and see how dramatic it is. But there are a lot of people who actually think like this, and they believe that if society does not have strong gender roles, then society will crumble into chaos. Now, I'm going to give you a homework to find a post with a transgender person, a gay person, or just a person that's just not conforming to gender roles. And I bet you that there's going to be one comment about how we're at the end of times or how God must be ready to come. And people keep pointing out how absolutely ridiculous and absurd that type of thinking is. Because as a civilization, we have gone through a lot. We've gone through a lot of inhumane events. The most notable being slavery, the Holocaust. So if any of those were not going to cause the world to end, why would somebody being gay or someone being transgender cause the world to end? But if you see how deep gender roles go, how society has been built on gender roles, you can kind of understand why these people feel end of timesy whenever they see these gender roles being challenged. For example, in some countries, even the language itself is influenced by gender. So they are terrified to challenge those roles because it seems like it's the very foundation of society. So how does sex actually come to play? And it's very simple because in a world where gender roles are now being challenged and with the advancement of women, society itself is now serving as a challenge for gender roles. Now, where does that leave the people who centered their entire identities around their gender? They start to feel attacked themselves. Because if you were strong and masculine because she's weak and helpless and she depends on you for everything, what happens when now she's making more money than you? Are you still strong and masculine? These are the type of thoughts that are attacking these people, even if it may be subconsciously. And so what a lot of people do is they try to find things to validate and affirm their gender identity. The more feminine you are, the more masculine that makes me feel, and the more masculine I look. And now I'm sexually attracted to you because you make me feel masculine, and vice versa. Now, Black people in America have an extra layer added on top when it comes to this conversation because they were never allowed to control the narrative about their gender identity. So in order to enslave Black women, white men created them to be this masculine figure, said they were barely women, so it was okay to enslave them and make them endure hard labor. And Black men were made to look effeminate because they were quote unquote conquered. And now Black people are getting the chance to write those narratives about themselves. And of course, there are a lot of conflicts. For example, some people want to write themselves as that feminine figure. That's where you see that feminine coaches, soft life girlies coming into play. They want to give themselves the opportunity to be that feminine protected damsel that they never got to be, that Black women never got a chance to experience. And with doing so, sometimes a lot of them will rewrite history. They will romanticize the past and leave out a lot of very crucial details that would change the entire narrative because they want that to be their reality. They want to be this feminine character and they want to write themselves in that story. But there's a reason why so many women fought against those roles. And a lot of the women who are wanting to sort of emulate those women back then are not really talking about that. They're not really discussing all of the drawbacks or the negative experiences that those women did encounter daily. And the same goes for a lot of Black men. They want to write themselves as this masculine figure and just basically get to experience that power that they did not have historically. But reality is not matching with the story that they're creating. Right now, Black men are facing, the highest unemployment rates. So they want to write this narrative about, being masculine, being head of the household, but conveniently leaving out the financial obligations that those men had to endure. And my thing is, when you're picking these partners based on how well they embody their gender roles, what happens when they get to a point where they can't anymore? He has an injury and he can't provide, or she gets sick and she can't nurture or take care of the home. What happens to the relationship then? Men are 6 times more likely to divorce a woman if she ends up with cancer. The first time I read that blew my mind. But now seeing firsthand how men are picking their spouses, it completely makes sense. They believe that femininity is service, and once you can no longer perform those services, you are no longer fit to be a wife. The interesting thing is the rate of divorce for men when they get sick with cancer is 2.9% compared to a woman's 20.8%. So it doesn't seem like women and men are of the same mind when it comes to this. But basing attraction on gender roles is going to hurt men as well. We see that women are excelling all the times in careers, as I said before. Now that is a lot of pressure for men. Now you're in a place where you always have to compete with your wife. And if she is excelling, instead of being happy for her and being happy that your income is growing together, you're now anxious and depressed because you're afraid that she's no longer going to find you attractive. And it puts men in a position where they have to hide their emotions because being vulnerable is seen as being feminine. So the person that you're supposed to confide in and be open to, now you can't do that because you're afraid that you're going to be seen as less manly. So there's nothing wrong in looking for a partner that's sweet, that's kind, if that's what you're attracted to, or looking for a partner that provides for you and that's a good leader. There's nothing wrong with that. But the stricter the categories, the less room for growth and change. And life is full of unforeseen changes. So I wonder how these relationships with strict gender roles in place will fare, and how happy the people who are inside of them will be. All in all, this conversation is very interesting to me, and I'm gonna keep watching the way that the pendulum swings. But for what it's worth, I don't believe that society is going to crumble if we challenge gender roles. I think our civilization has a higher chance of surviving if we make our ideologies match reality. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening. And join me next time when we discuss Vampire Diaries and how it's a white woman's guidebook to becoming a white supremacist. Bye!